Good morning, and first this morning a piece of advice to all people who are thinking about complaining about authority in British Columbia. I would say at a very minimum estimate that 150 or 200 people call me every year with gruesome complaints about lawyers, doctors, dentists, teachers and policemen. Everybody, you might say, bar Indian chiefs, and I believe have had one complaint about an Indian chief in the past. And I tell these people, after I've listened to their story, to put it in writing to the appropriate authority and ask for an investigation of their complaint. Up to now, good, sound, safe advice. But in view of the fact that the Attorney General of the province of BC is conducting a very embarrassing probe at the moment, I better explain the basic facts of life to you. What the Attorney General is looking at is a case where the mother of a man arrested by police wrote to the Attorney General's office complaining about the way her son was treated in the hands of police. Now, if she'd phoned me, I'd have told her not to write to the Attorney General, but to write to the BC Police Commission with a copy to me, so that I could keep an eye on the developments of that particular case. But then all of a sudden, we have this Attorney General investigation on the very proper basis that the policemen involved, somehow or other, almost instantly it would seem, came into possession of the details of the complaint and are now threatening to sue the woman who complained with some form of defamation. And you might be a nervous Nelly and have a big case on your hand today about your own alleged or believed mistreatment at the hands of some authoritative body, and you might be afraid to write. Now let me tell you what the score is. Anytime you write a letter in which you make complaints about another individual, and these complaints say bad things about them and are defamatory, you are, in fact, in the position, once this letter has been distributed, of being sued for defamation. But that shouldn't stop you from writing the letter. I don't know the facts or what's behind this particular case, and we'll leave that to the Attorney General. Just another investigation for him to make, and the pile's already on his desk. But let me make a couple of things clear. You are entitled to write your letter of complaint if you honestly believe that you have a valid complaint, even if that complaint is only hearsay. In other words, your daughter says something happened at the school. Your son says something happened in the hands of the police. Or, directly involved, you don't like or don't trust the conduct of a lawyer. Or if you think a doctor cut off the wrong leg, or a dentist ruined your mouth. Complain, complain, complain. But, and this word is really more to the authorities than it is to you, the writer of that letter, even though technically and on the face of it, they may have committed a civil offense of defamation of some case, is entitled to protection in the first stage from the authority who receives the letter. That authority, knowing that honest people, believing things honestly, can be misguided or wrongly informed, must look at the letter and say, well, it seems a bit hairy, but let's make a preliminary investigation of it to see if it stands up at all. If it doesn't stand up at all, the complainant should be so informed after a proper preliminary investigation and the matter hopefully dropped. If it is a valid complaint with some valid basis and the person honestly believes it and has some basis in fact, then and only then should the identity of the complainant be passed on to those who are being complained about. Now, if you've ever complained to the College of Physicians and Surgeons, you will find that they write you back and they say to you quite bluntly, we've got your letter, we're prepared to look into it, but please understand, this letter, the contents of it, must go to the doctor involved so he has a fair chance to study it and reply. The same happens in the legal profession. Now, it may just have been a slip-up in this particular case, I don't know. But the message I'm giving you is, because of this, don't be afraid to complain. And I'm saying to those in the BC Police Commission and elsewhere, be sure to protect the identity of the complainant until you know what's in it and if it's worthwhile pursuing on behalf of the complainant to clean up the act. Because I'd hate the impression to get around that any time you write a letter of complaint, or that you're muzzled because you're afraid to write a letter of complaint in case you're going to be sued for defamation. We'll get the Attorney General's report on this in due course, but just remember these basic facts. 1, you are entitled to complain. 2, you should complain in writing. 3, the body to whom you complain should always have the decency and the common sense to protect your identity until they have judged whether it's a proper complaint to go forward, because I believe there is a legal defense in the fact that if you make an honest complaint, and there is some basis for it, that you are covered by a qualified form of privilege. It's just a word to the wise, and also a word to all those authorities who handle public complaints. Don't look on this thing as a way of putting complaints into the garbage can. So that's the first piece of happy news this morning. My second piece of happy news this morning is that I'm going to interview a specialized counsellor in the treatment of juveniles. And if all goes well as billed, he will tell us about millions of dollars being wasted by a highly efficient, incompetent system operated in British Columbia by any government that happens to be in power at the time. His name is Hugh Hayward. He's from Victoria, and I'll interview Hayward after the break. I gave it to you with the...
coming back.
No, it's on your desk now. The blue letter from the girl in Enderby.
No, I've not taken it.
Oh, I think
Here it is.
Some remarks by the way of introduction. About a month ago, I told you the tragic story of a 12-year-old boy who was homicidal, suicidal, schizophrenic, and the best treatment that we, in the wealthy province of British Columbia, could give this boy for 8 long weeks was to dope him with chloropromazine, put him on a mattress on the floor of the juvenile detention center in Willingdon in Burnaby, and keep him there. And after 8 weeks, he finally asked. He had no therapy, no exercise, very little contact with people except those on duty in the hallway where he slept. And after 8 weeks, the little boy asked if he might put his head out of the window so he could hear the rain, so he could feel the rain on his face. And then recently we've had a report by a counsellor of some kind from Coquitlam about conditions in the juvenile detention centre in Burnaby. And then we have a fascinating case going in the courts just now where the Superintendent of Child Welfare is sought to be defined as an unfit parent because of the behaviour of a child in his custody. And just the other day I got a letter from the interior of British Columbia, and it is a shocker. I've checked this letter out. The facts in it are basically correct, and it's about a young girl who is an alcoholic. And just to summarize it, just to show you how... Oh, and before I forget that, we've also got the case of the chap who's serving life with no possibility of parole for 10 years in Matsquay, who started his career by going to the Maples in Burnaby at the age of 14. Seldom been out of jail since. He's now 23 and he can't get out of jail to go home to his native country of Holland, of which he is a citizen, until he has served 10 years. And then the other day I pick up this particular letter from this girl. I talk to the girl and I make some inquiries about her background and check it out. And she went to the Maples when she was 14. And she went to a group home in the interior of British Columbia where nobody had any experience in handling anybody. and she ran away. She was arrested by the RCMP. She spent her first 7 days in jail. She's now 14. She goes to another group home. She runs away. She goes to another remand home when she's caught, and she tries twice to commit suicide. Then, of course, as things go on normally, as they do in our system of handling youngsters, in the summer of '78, she's charged with a couple of B&Es and theft. And then she goes to the Willingdon Centre, this delightful place, where she describes, probably accurately, the acid, the fighting, the attempted suicide, the mental cases, the handcuffs, back to Maples, runaway, streets of Vancouver, heavy drugs, goes to a camp where there's lots of pills, hash oil and pot, finishes up in a psychiatric ward with 80-year-olds. Then she goes back to camp, back to Willingdon. 3 months sentence. She lasted 6 days in Willingdon before she got out. Then she went to inexperienced foster parents, and then she took to the bottle, and she had a social worker and an alcohol and drug worker. Then she was picked up for mischief. Then she was in jail not once but twice for up to 10 days. And where is she now? She's back in court. Well, this guy here, Hayward, Hugh Hayward, is a specialized youth counselor, and he's from Vancouver Island. Now, I may not like what he's going to say, but he comes extraordinarily well recommended for his social worker. He's done a lot of specialized counseling. Vandazam thinks he's good. Police departments think he's good. The Ministry of Health think he's good. Judges in provincial courts think he's good. And he's going to tell me, I hope, or give me, are you a radical of some kind in terms of your approach to social work?
Not at all.
What are you?
I don't think it's radical to, to adapt to a community. If that's radical, I'm radical. To utilize a community, if that's radical.
Don't baffle me with social work talk.
I'm not a radical, no.
All right, you said to me...
I'm unconventional.
...in your material that there are millions and millions of dollars wasted in British Columbia, that we have our head in the sand, that nothing gets any better. In fact, things get worse. Is that correct?
Very much so.
Make a case.
Well, frankly, it's apparent that the whole orientation of the social work profession, the helping this social services profession, is problem orientation, not solution orientation. We are inclined towards a psychotherapeutic, a talking approach, rather than a functional solution approach to the needs of children and families, such as this letter that you received from this young girl, where intervention at a particular time could have prevented a tremendous amount of suffering.
Well, just to take that letter from that girl and take it from me that the facts are basically correct. How many times could that be? Many times could that kind of childhood history from 14 to 17 be duplicated in BC?
I personally have worked with approximately 80 children who have a very similar documentation of their lives.
What would the cost in dollars be to society of dealing with any one or all of these children in BC who've gone through this Maples, runaway, detention center, group homes, foster homes, courts, detention center, runaways, camps, the lot?
$500,000 to $1 million. I've seen a therapeutic bill for $1 million for a 16-year-old.
You're joking?
No, I'm not joking.
How could they make up a therapeutic bill for $1 million for a 16-year-old?
600 hours of a psychiatric assessment alone. That's $60, $70, $80 an hour, plus $150 a day to stay there in the facility. That's just one thing. Programs such as Outward Bound programs, Machosen Ranch, Center Creek, $100, $125 to $150 a day. Alternative educational programs, court costs, $500 to $1,500 an appearance. I've been in court with some kids that have been there 200 times.
200 times at $500 an appearance is how much? $10,000?
Sure,
And that's for just a simple appearance?
Yeah, not to mention, projected costs in terms of a child reaching the age of 17 and raised to adult court and entering the provincial and federal prison systems, which is, it's almost impossible.
How many children in Canada in youth detention centers at the moment?
In Canada, I think it was 80,000.
80,000?
80,000, yes. That's probably a year-and-a-half-old study. It's probably substantially more than that.
Already I'm beginning to think that the system, as you believe, and I suspect, is such a colossal con game and colossal failure that maybe we should wipe the whole thing out, take the social consequences, and let kids survive as they will.
They'd have a better chance.
You're joking.
Well, I think they would.
How about yourself? Were you born with some silver spoon in your mouth?
Not exactly. No, I was a byproduct of the system. I wasn't care as a child. I went through a lot of the same kinds of frustrations and fears that children experience going into a foster placement or going into a group home placement, where there are various degrees of skill, various degrees of motivation why people work and have children around them that are in need. And,
money. I should imagine many of them in the bad old days. There were lots of group homes and foster homes that ran because of the fairly large income that came in, and I can remember some of them that used to pick up $50,000 and $60,000 a month for a handful of children.
Yeah, well, I lived in one home where they were contracted with the Department of Veterans Affairs and Department of Indian Affairs. They had 3 group homes, and they had about 9 of us kids, and we did all the laundry, all the cooking, all the washing. Many times I didn't get to school.
Because you were too busy working in the group home?
Right.
Are you suggesting, how old are you now, Hugh?
I'm 34.
Are you suggesting these conditions are still extant today?
No, not to that degree. There are things worse. And when I was a child, the streets were different. They were violent, but they were not drug-oriented. Drugs have changed the whole structure, the whole dynamic of the street.
Is there any simple cure for the whole thing?
Yes, there is.
What is it?
It's a very simple cure. It's to deal with children and people individually, to assess them properly. Our whole assessment procedure is totally fragmented. It's totally it's without purpose. And
but
again,
you're going to give me the old line that we mustn't have any containment of any kind and that we don't need containment of any kind, and I won't accept that.
No, I won't accept it either. I think we do need containment, but I'd say 95% of the kids in containment now, conservatively, I'm being very conservative, don't have to be there. I made an offer to the minister not too long ago. I said in 3 months I'd remove 98% of the kids from juvenile detention center in Victoria.
Did you?
Well, I would if you give me a chance.
Have you ever had any success in removing kids?
Yes, I have.
Tell me about the successes. Hugh Hayward, specialized youth counselor. Youth counselor? Juvenile counselor?
Counselor.
After the break. First of all, Hugh Hayward, I want you to establish your credentials, because you've been fired from a few government jobs, have you not?
Several, yes, I have.
Tell me which ones you were fired from.
Well, I started off at a reception and diagnostic center, which was a facility which we took children.
Are you a social worker?
No. My academic orientation is science and marine biology. But
I mean, that's what you learned in school?
Yeah.
Right. Academic orientation. You see, you begin to talk like a social worker. Okay, why were you fired from the Research and Diagnostic Center?
I guess it was the manner in which I dealt with kids. I tended to be fairly realistic with them.
What's realistic with a child? He's smoking pot, you let him smoke pot.
No, on the contrary.
If he drinks, you let him drink.
No, on the contrary. Exactly the opposite. A criteria for behavior, letting kids know exactly what limitations are and what they need to know and what they have to develop as skills in order to live in the community.
You mean discipline?
Discipline, yes.
Okay, you left that one anyway. Next one.
Seven Oaks Children's Center was a residential treatment center for emotionally and behaviorally disruptive kids.
How long were you there?
Over a year.
What happened there?
I set up some programs of my own within the facility to deal with kids and to deal with them in a very practical way, to give them a sense of themselves, to give them a sense of community participation.
Seven Oaks didn't like this.
No, so I got fired.
Next one.
Then I went to the Y Outreach program, which is a human resources street work program, working with natural street groups. And I worked in a very disruptive...
You mean gangs?
Yeah. And I worked there for a year and a half and decided that, kids that were up to their eyeballs in pot and drugs and living and sleeping in Goodwill boxes didn't want to bounce a basketball, you know. I don't think that's too hard to
What do they
understand.
want to do?
They want somebody to confront them. They want someone to share with them information and how to develop those skills they need to survive. They don't want to go to jail. Nobody wants to be alone. Who the hell wants to be alone? What kid wants to be alone? What kid wants to go to jail? It's not a valuable, viable alternative, you know. They want someone that's going to.
And what was wrong with the Y program?
I couldn't see working with children and not working with families. I think families have to be a very integral part of the process of healing, of learning.
Being the mother and father.
Yeah, and
Better
a
the
community.
kids back with a difficult mother and father than living in a foster home.
Sure.
That's revolutionary.
Yeah, well, I got fired.
Okay, of you, Van der Zalm, now lots of people hate Van der Zalm. Of you, Van der Zalm says, to whom it may concern, his determined and positive attitude has ensured the success of the projects he has undertaken. Results gratifying. What for human resources and assignment? What program was that?
Well, I approached the minister after about 6 years of just the nonsense I had to deal with and that my colleagues had to deal with in the name of trying to help children. And I went up to him in a spirit of resignation. I told him I thought the system stunk and gave him a whole bunch of reasons why, and we discussed it for about 2 hours, and he said, "Can you do any better?" And I said, "Yes, I can." He said, "Well, go design it and bring it back," and I did, and I designed it and I brought it back.
What was it? Life skills?
I didn't have a name for the program. The program was titled by the regional director. It's a life skills pre-employment program. What it is a program of counseling, a program of teaching children, young people, some reality in terms of their communities. In other words, a policeman is not a pig. A policeman is a policeman, and he has a role in a community. Assessment, we have a totally antiquated assessment
Before
process.
you come to assessment, how much did Van der Zalm give you money to?
Yeah, he gave me $31,000 to work with 24 of the most disruptive kids in the region. These kids were, some of them had as many as 200 criminal charges. Heroin addicts, excessive drug users, alcoholics, prostitutes, male and female.
How long did you run it?
2 years.
On the 31,000 a year?
No, I ran it the first year and sent back $16,000, which got me into a lot of trouble.
They wouldn't know what to do with the money?
Yeah, they didn't know how to put it back in the treasury. But then the minister said, okay, if we're going to go for expansion, I didn't have anything more to prove, and the kids didn't have anything more to prove.
You were a success with these 200 kids?
The children were a success, 24 kids a year.
24
Yeah.
kids.
So the minister suggested that he asked me if I would come back the second year and document it in preparation for provincial expansion as a program ongoing.
What happened?
And I did. And I, again, had a tremendous success rate, sent back $12,000 or $15,000. And another 24 kids were on their way. And the minister addressed himself to the Social Services Committee of Cabinet, also to the regional level, also to the deputy ministerial level, and expressed his wish to expand the program and to, allow
Couldn't get it through?
It was held off, I guess, long enough for the minister to be moved out of office. And he died, I died, and
Everything
the
died.
kids are making more money than you and I put together. So
How are you making a living now?
I do private consulting work. A consultant is a person who can't get a job in the government.
Okay, for whom do you do the consulting?
I do it for provincial court, for private agencies. I do it for whoever asks me. And,
Probation officers?
Yeah, sometimes, if they have enough courage to require my services.
On a one-on-one basis?
One-on-one, assessment, coordination, designing programs specifically for each kid, and moving those kids back into their communities, out of the corrections system. I might add that out of these 48 kids, only 2 of them, to my knowledge, have been before the judge, and they were on fairly minor offenses.
You're telling me that
4
if
years.
you take a juvenile delinquent and you assess him properly...
Can we say young person? I hate juvenile delinquent. I hate that word.
Kids is good at what is it?
Young people?
Youngster.
They're my friends.
No, you take a youngster and you assess him properly. You try and establish contact with the family in some way, re-educate him. You didn't have a one-to-one basis when you were handling these 24 kids on the 30,000 a
Groups of
year.
8. Groups of 8.
And if it's done intelligently and properly, it can succeed.
You know, the reason that it succeeded was the kids themselves. The morality, the integrity, the strength of these young people is phenomenal. I mean, I was up to my you know, up to my ankles in red tape and administrative hassles and all sorts of problems pertaining to the program. I spent maybe 25% of my time with the kids, and they still made it through.
But you can't avoid red tape. The human resources budget this year is some hundreds and hundreds of
700
millions.
and some odd million.
How much of it is wasted?
Well, in terms of services to people, most of it.
Are there no successes in the present system?
Sure, you know, sure there are. But I deal with children very much at risk. I deal with families and children in crisis, and people that are truly on their way to the joint. Some of my kids have been referred out of Ocala to the program.
This girl who wrote to me with all these details, which I checked out, says at the end of her letter, and it's quite interesting. She's got the usual horrendous maples on
sad.
to disaster.
Sad, you know.
She says one thing which is quite interesting. Oh, I'm 17 now, and the only thing that will keep me out of trouble is the word Ocala. I barely survived 2.5 years of juvenile places, so I know I won't be able to handle Ocala.
It's a
Is
horrible
the
place.
eventual fear of a nasty jail one of the cures for youngsters?
It's not a cure, but it's a reality, and it's the only alternative. That's what I'm saying is why can't someone address that young person in terms of who they are, what their needs are specifically? There's no, I bet
Okay,
you...
suppose you can get a young person at 17 who's an alcoholic, chippy, heroin addict of some kind. How do you address the reality for them?
Well,
Isn't it easier to write them off?
No, it's not.
It's easier to write
It's
them off.
easier to write them off. I mean, let's face it, okay, the provincial and federal prison system are one of the largest corporations in Canada. What the hell's the raw material for that system? Kids.
Webster and Hugh Hayward after the break. You impressed me with the fact that the 24 youngsters you dealt with in your life skills program, 200 court appearances, and we'll say whatever it was, but for all the kids who go to court and come from court, it must cost us millions of dollars alone in unsuccessful appearances.
Yeah, multi-millions of dollars.
Now, when you attack the assessment and diagnosis, I want you to be quite specific. Who is doing what wrong?
Well, overall, it is the fact that agencies, that the medical community are not working together. In my work, and I've done, I guess, 70 individual assessment processes to date in the last couple of years, I have found medical misdiagnoses. I've found situations where kids were not diagnosed, period. I've found situations where kids have been assessed until their eyeballs popped out. However, nothing has been done on the basis of that information. In other words, we assess and then we say, oh, we got it,
Okay,
good.
but give me an example. What was the misassessment? What was wrong with the system?
There was a
The
child.
kid comes in, or you give me the facts.
Okay, this is just an out, so I have to be careful with this. But this child,
change it a
10
little
years, 11 years in the system, okay? The child started school, and for the first 3 years of school, sat in the back of the classroom, fidgeted, ran away. They were doing things like taking his shoes off, putting him in a closet, taking his shirt off, putting it in a closet, doing all sorts of things to keep him there. I found out, this was 10 years later after the kid had been sentenced to 2.5 years in jail for something at the age of 16, that the kid spent the first 3 years of his life in school with a paralyzed tongue and lower jaw. He couldn't talk. He was assessed as retarded. No one asked mother. She tried to tell him that the kid had a paralyzed jaw and paralyzed tongue. And I checked it. I went back to the physician of some years back and got the documentation which supported that evidence.
Well, that's an extreme case, though. How many kids have paralyzed tongues and can't
Yeah,
talk?
but there are kids that have deficits that are equally as horrendous who have not been dealt with. There are children with learning disabilities. There are 100,000 kids in this province with learning disabilities who are not dealt with in a remedial way, in a functional, alternative way in terms of their educational process.
Because nobody's
They're
allowed to
ignored.
be dull or backwards today, are they?
Well, not really, you know. I mean, to a degree we're tolerant, you know, but we're certainly less tolerant than we might be.
Well, when a
largely
child
because
comes
of the
in,
media.
when a child, supposing we've got not the one with the paralyzed tongue, but somebody else, and they come into the juvenile hands, why, in the first place, why would they come in? Unmanageability or its equivalent?
Well, this child was up for attempted murder at this point when I got him. There are unmanageability. That's the sequence which leads to the Protection of Children's Act, which leads to a children coming under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Human Resources.
How effective is the Protection of Children's Act?
To some degree it's effective, but it's only as effective as the alternatives you're presenting in
Okay, well,
terms
say
of
I'm a 14-year-old or a 13-year-old disaster of some kind. Just accept them as a disaster. And I've got an alcoholic mother and an alcoholic father and an unstable mother, or just a woman that's worried witless about where her next meal is coming from. And the kid's probably been beaten about the old man. What can you do? You bring him in under the Protection of Children Act. And you send him to, what would you do?
What we do, what the system does, is they bring him in, they provide lodging, food, and clothing, and try to stabilize and normalize his life as best they can, okay? In terms of a kid 14 years old, there's bound to be some damage, okay? The educational process has been interfered with. The social and emotional developmental process has been interfered with. So you've got a kid who's 14 or 16 years old who may be developmentally 9 or 8, who may be educationally grade 2 or 3 level education.
When you're stuck with the mixed quality of medical diagnosis, whether it's forensic clinic, psychiatric assessment, or medical, right? What's the system that treats the boy under the Hayward plan? Is it an individual who treats him, and only an individual?
Well, no, the information gathered, okay, it's like the court ultimately is where this information is. Yeah, okay. So gathering, synthesizing information is one thing, and doing additional testing is another thing. But that testing, when I do it, my orientation or my direction is to find out what strengths that child has. How can I develop the areas of strength so that child can move into the community, not so that he can move into a treatment facility?
In the meantime, you might put him in a foster home of doubtful quality.
Perhaps, but foster placements are by and large good. People are fairly committed. They don't make money, believe me, it's not a money-making business. Therapeutic care is a little more lucrative, but even then, you know, you got kids that are so disruptive and so angry and so aggressive that those people aren't in it for the bucks.
You will agree with me that there are cases where there must be containment.
Oh, absolutely. But very few.
Give me your breakdown of what the Marquardt report about JDC means.
Well, okay, the Marquardt report, basically what they were talking about was the using, the availability, the usage of containment facilities as opposed to remand or alternative facilities. Okay, what really overall is happening is human resources, corrections, health, education are taking shots at each other. That's what's happening right now, okay? The Marquardt report said that containment by statute of law is a last resort, okay? However, in 85% of the cases, probation officers have been opting on as a first choice containment as opposed to alternatives. But that's because there are no alternatives. We talk about alternatives. Where are? I don't know any alternatives to containment. I don't know any community programs that have been developed to the point where they provide the structure, the supervision,
well, I thought there was all kinds of community programs. I see all this money going through human resources.
No.
I see all the social workers. I presume there are community programs.
No, there aren't. If it weren't for the volunteer segment of our community, if it weren't for the people that work themselves to the bone for nothing, who hang in there on behalf of children, the system would fall on its butt overnight. The only effective work we do as a ministry, I'm talking about corrections, human resources, is when we rely on the community, when we take our process to the community. The community ultimately are responsible for these clients and these children and these families. And whenever we utilize the community and the resources in the community, we have success. So why the hell don't we admit it to ourselves and start putting some money where it belongs? You know, instead of $150 a day in the forensic clinic, I could stay at the Bayshore Inn with a kid for less than it costs to stay at the forensic clinic. Not to mention, okay, I'll give you another case, okay? I took a child there, and I'm really hot about this one because I'm still involved with this child. I took the kid over to the forensic clinic. It's in Port Coquitlam. And 15 years old, and I walked into that place, and it's a shocker. Believe me, this kid was in a barracks-like atmosphere with 25 adult males who were in there for a variety of reasons, a forensic psychiatric unit.
Order and counsel, perhaps.
There's a lot of very disturbed people in there. It's like a army barracks.
Yeah, we did a piece on it last year.
Yeah, how the hell are you going to do a creative assessment? How are you going to deal with a child? The object of assessment is to truly look into and explore a child's makeup and characteristics so that you can act in a positive way on their behalf. We had to wait around 4 hours, first of all, because they bungled the admittance procedures after about 20 phone calls from Victoria. I stayed with the kid in there 4 hours because the shock of the place was so great, you know. And if it weren't really for the dedication and the sensitivity of the staff people, that kid would have come out of there in very serious trouble. But the majority of kids that would go into a place like that would be so so fearful and so just, you know, just come apart just by being there, that the assessment would be not valid.
Come apart myself if I
Me
went in there
too.
as an adult.
Me too. It was terrible, you know. It's a terrible place. And yet, across the
Mind you,
road
it
they
seems
have...
to me that Human Resources always holds their own meetings in the Hyatt Regency.
Oh, yeah. Well, we have multi-million-dollar conferences also that talk about the things we could be doing, you know. But, and
How
they...
do you get it down to the line level, though? What do we need to be done? As you say, to get proper assessment, proper realistic retraining. Am I right when I say
Right.
realistic retraining?
Retraining, yes, and to allow the child, the family, the community to participate. It's the child's life now.
Lots of families don't want to participate.
Oh, they do. I've seen, like in this program that I was involved in, I saw families who hadn't even talked to their kids for years connect.
Begin to talk, but people come to me all the time, and it's always a child custody case in the Protection of Children's Act, and you look at the family and you say, thank God Human Resources took the child away. Is that not a fact?
Sure. Some of the kids are horrendous. I mean, it's, I don't fault the parents at that point, you know, it gets very difficult.
You have personal knowledge of the JD, what do you call it?
Juvenile Detention
in
Center.
Victoria.
Yeah, it's...
Didn't they build a new one there?
Oh, they built a new one, all right. They pumped about $400 and some odd thousand into let me little quote, okay. The Honorable Hugh Curtis, referring to the Juvenile Detention Center. A new facility, clean, safe, bright, healthy, well-equipped. And about, I guess, a week after press time, the $200,000 damage had been done to the place already. They had to change all the locks, all the doors. But what I mean is, okay, there's $600,000 that has been pumped into that facility, but I'd like to see $50 that has been pumped into a community alternative program.
Webster and Hugh Hayward after the break. I use the case of this 12-year-old perhaps unfairly because he's, I think, got a neurological problem. The majority of children who come into care don't actually have homicidal or suicidal diagnosis, do they?
No, it's not common. I mean, children have... okay, suicide and the threat of suicide to a lot of children is a viable alternative, okay?
It's a cry for help,
Indeed
really.
it is. Indeed it is. And kids, you know, mark up their wrists, they mark up their legs, they mark up their face.
How much does it cost us to keep a child in a juvenile containment center in BC?
Minimum. The minimum, room and board, not mentioning special therapeutic, you know, programs, also about $36,000 a year.
$36,000 per person
kid,
a year. What's
per
the
kid.
budget for it, do you know?
Well, at any one time in a province there are approximately 100 kids contained, so that's...
$360 million a year or something like that.
That's a low average.
How many of them should not be in jail?
About 95% of them. That's a very conservative estimate. I'm being polite this morning.
You know how society is. Society wants violent people locked up regardless who they are, what they are, or why they did it, and they wants them kept locked up.
Well, I agree, but I also say that generally the public are not aware of the process. I think people assume that we are doing a good job. I think people assume that we're taking care of business by assessing children properly, by providing for their needs properly.
One, they're not assessing them properly.
No, there's
Two,
not.
they're not providing for their needs properly.
No.
What else they're not doing?
It's just our whole approach, okay, health, education, welfare, corrections, they're all involved, okay? Human resources always get the flack because that's the end of the road, and they shouldn't. They shouldn't get the flack. What about education that by statute say, okay, when a child is 15, catch you later? Most kids I know are at the crisis at 15, kids that are really acting
You're talking
out.
about most delinquent children.
Most delinquent, and those are the kids that, I think that's what the School Board Act was written for those kids. In terms of a child being removed from school, there are very, very few alternative educational programs in our schools. Sexuality, sexual development, it's almost a no-no in the school system. I mean, there's a lot of teenage pregnancies, there's a lot of teenage abortions, the trauma on a young woman going through that stuff, the trauma on a young woman in premarital sex and pre-adolescent sex. You know, I mean, that's stuff these kids have to know about. And
Okay,
that's what,
you say don't throw the ball entirely at human resources.
Indeed not.
Education is largely the blame.
Sure.
What else?
Well, corrections. Because corrections, okay, I've been reading the Marquardt report. I've read hundreds of reports, okay, from corrections. Yeah, stacks of them. Studies, lots of studies, you know. And what they say is if there are no alternatives, let us develop them. Well, they know damn well there are no alternatives, you know. And yes, why don't we develop them? I really don't understand why. I don't know. The alternatives are there. There are programs. Okay,
You base your whole concept on, one, the failure of the present system.
well, it's always been a failure.
Which supplies graduates for Ocala, Kent, Mission, Matsquay, and all the rest of them.
For sure.
There isn't any doubt about that. You base your attack on the court system too, which merely acts as a delaying action holding unit into detention centres, at which time they get no proper treatment whatsoever.
Well, as I say, the purpose of detention is not treatment, it's containment.
Where do you
It's
start?
not rehabilitation.
Where do you stop?
You start by, okay, the courts. I consider the courts a very credible area, okay, because I say if you present a judge with information on behalf of a child, if it isn't done a lot, if you present the judge with an alternative to containment on behalf of that child, then the judge is in a position to act and enforce an
What
order.
alternatives does he have now? He's got foster homes, group homes, the Maples, Seven Oaks, a few odds and ends of treatment, right?
That isn't a program, though. It's like Machosen Ranch or Center Creek program. They teach a kid, you go out there, you learn how to climb mountains, you learn first aid, you learn survival skills, you learn communication skills. Great. But
Big
then
help.
what happens at the end of 16 weeks? Wham, you're on the street again with all your little certificates. What about the rest? What about community? What about vocational, educational training? What about emotional, psychological needs? What about the rest of it? What about the holistic? What about the whole child? What about the family?
You'd want to put a social worker or equivalent with every single delinquent in the province.
You have to throw that one back to me again.
You'd want one-on-one, totally, for each child.
No, okay, my areas are the
That
kids.
might be a better system. It might be cheaper, too.
Well, social workers are in a bind. I know social workers that have 150 people on their caseload. You can't work effectively with that, you know. Most social workers I know are very dedicated. I'm not being patronizing. I sincerely mean that. However, nobody has really said, okay, as a unit, the BC Council of Federation of Social Workers hasn't said, look, system, shape up or we're going to shut her down. The system would change in a week. But that involves putting your job and your earning and your mortgage payments on the line.
Are
you
they
know?
competent to say that?
Well, I think social
have
work,
the
we're not
knowledge
indignant. We're not, the social work profession are not indignant as to the way children and families are treated. Look at single parent mothers, $490 a month to raise a child. How the heck can you live like that? Everything we do, and we've cut out special needs to families, special services where a mother can get extra stuff. A child wants to go to camp. Sure, I can get a freebie for a kid to go to camp, but I can't get a freebie for the mother to go with him. We isolate children from their communities. We isolate families from each other, and it's unnecessary. Because whenever we've had success in this system, we've gone to the community, we've gone to the volunteers, we've gone to the private agencies. That's where success is. I mean, ultimately, look at this, community-style prison life urged. It's a new study, another study, where they're trying to duplicate community in the prison system. You know?
If they do it outside, they
Yeah.
get on along.
Because ultimately, those people are going to go back in the community. If they don't have any skills, they're not going to do anything. It's like saying that if you get a kid a job, he's going to be all better. That's nonsense.
Mind you, I find it hard to blame human resources, even if they're not at the bottom of the heap, because I know damn fine there are some good people there
Indeed.
who work under different political masters or different shades of government. One of the great things about the NDP was to wipe out all jails. Didn't work. We needed some containment places. They had to reopen Willingdon for a start. Now, they may not be handling it right, but because the system has collapsed, we had to reopen Willingdon, didn't we?
Sure. Well, there's a proportionate thing here, okay, whereby a deinstitutionalization, decentralization of human
Your
resources is a reinstitutionalization of correction.
So your basic message is that in any 100 juvenile delinquents whom we regard as lepers at the moment, maybe at the very most 5 would need extremely sophisticated specialized treatments.
Yes.
You're saying the other 95 need common sense, reintroduction, retraining with their parents or whatever in the community.
They need a holistic approach to their needs in the
simple.
community. It is extremely simple, but it works. I don't believe in criticizing unless you have a better idea, and that's where Mr. Vanderzam and I really got along, is because he said, can you do any better? And I said, yes, I can do better, and he gave me an opportunity to prove it, and I proved it for 2 years in a row.
Could you do that on a mass? I mean, could that be done on a mass scale?
Sure, because it's like one of the real problems in this province right now is the communities are running out of resources because these kids burn them out. There is an approach to developing your community on behalf of a child.
You're getting away from me. Do you want to take some phone calls?
Sure, if you like. If they're mean, you take them, okay?
I don't know if they'll mean anything, but let's try it after the break. Hugh Hayward, if you're in court with a youngster and that youngster, a program is presented for him and the judge says carry out that program, is that program carried out?
Not always. I was involved in a case not too long ago where this was another medical ambiguity, you know, where a kid who had been hyperactive as a child was placed on a treatment program of Ritalin, which is a drug maintenance program. The dosage was 3 times the prescribed pharmaceutical dosage. The kid didn't need it. Now, the adverse reaction to Ritalin at that point is contrary behavior. It works the opposite. It speeds him up. Anyhow, that's how he was treated for years. He was disruptive. He was destroying his community, destroying his family and his home, you know, literally. And I coordinated an assessment with the help of the medical and psychiatric community and presented it to His Honor in court and presented the justification for it. Human Resources had an opportunity to discuss and to dispute any points. That was not done. The judge so ordered the program. Okay, I went to court 24 times, 1 Supreme Court hearing. I went to 23 interministerial crisis committee meetings and related meetings.
On this one boy?
Yeah, the kid
You're joking?
No, the kid was placed 8 times in a 10-week period in 8 foster placements.
You tell me you went to court 24 times?
25, 1 Supreme Court
One
hearing.
Supreme Court.
Because the judge
to get
finally...
the judge's order implemented.
Well, it was ignored. The judge was completely ignored, and he finally got so uptight about it that he ordered the probation officer to be the guardian, which is totally...
That was you?
No, the probation officer of this child
the
was ordered,
treatment
so they had to appeal it in the Supreme Court. However, what ultimately got services to that child, literally as designed and as presented to the court, was the MLA phoning the Premier and phoning Grace McCarthy and phoning the Deputy Minister who phoned the regional office and said, do it.
Your facts are right on that?
Yes.
How's the boy now?
He's doing fine, reasonably well. After 10 years of living on Ritalin, he's not doing
Mind you,
bad.
you're blowing your own, that was a success story, but you're blowing your own horn on this one.
No, I'm not, because the success was the child and the fact that the community worked together. Whenever I do a program, whenever I'm involved with a child, it involves the whole community. That's why I'm saying I work with probation officers, social workers, we all work together.
Well, I've got you on because I have a strong feeling that the whole system creaks to a halt every now and again. When I come across things like Wee Jimmy,
yeah, it's pretty
where
bizarre.
where the interministerial committee can only suggest that this boy, instead of being doped in a mattress, is put in a motel and given a 24-hour-a-day guard.
That is a totally ineffective committee. The only committee, there's 3 of them. There's a local, regional, and provincial committee. The only committee that makes any sense is a local committee. Again, the community. The regional and the provincial committees are totally
And yet, you know, I'm
without
suspicious of some community committees. I may well be wrong.
It's the best shot we have.
Go ahead to Hugh Hayward. Where are you?
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes. Is this Mr. Webster?
Yes?
Oh, I just wanted to say that I have...
It's a remedial ed program dealing specifically with children with learning disabilities. But there are 2 studies, okay? There was a study done several years ago called the Berman study, and another one recently done, it's called the Broder study. And these studies, these multi-million-dollar studies, were specifically designed to develop a correlation between learning disabilities and juvenile delinquency. The correlation is approximately 70% more of an opportunity for a learning disabled kid to become delinquent, obviously, because they're at odds with the system.
What
They
about
cannot
this woman
function.
and her problems? How can she avoid the problems with 2 severely dyslexic children?
There just are not enough programs for children. There are 100,000 children in this province.
Can a parent cope with that problem themselves, herself?
Mr. Webster?
Yeah?
No, the children cannot cope with that problem themselves when you really thoroughly
I'm not-
understand the problem.
No, I understand the problem, but I'm putting it to Hugh, you know, how much parental input is important in that one.
Well, the parental input is substantial because she is the mother of those children. Those children are incredibly demanding. However, whenever there's a cutback, it's always in the area of special education. There are very, very few children who have special educational needs that are being dealt with in our school system. They're ignored. They are
Do you
ignored.
agree with that, ma'am?
Yes, I certainly do. And Again, there has been millions of dollars of studies done in the States for good educational programs. I believe these children do not have learning difficulties. I believe they have learning differences.
Ma'am, thanks for your interest. I'm much obliged. Go ahead, please.
Mr. Hayward, it's a treat to hear somebody with some sense talking on this program. I believe you're a voice crying in the wilderness. However, I'm at the other end. I'm the parent of an inmate, and my son has got help this time. But there's an area which I feel should be looked at as far as money is concerned, and that's machinery and things that are in the program for the men to use, and some of them, they're $100,000 machines. They're not being used, and they have to dispose of them some way. They can't write them off. They just gradually disappear. A lot of these fellows, when they come out, they've got training. They would like to be able to purchase things like this at a reasonable price so they could get going. My son has been thwarted every way in society.
How old is he?
He's 28. And he was a dyslexia child. He's very gifted. And now he does need help when he gets out with machinery and things to set up a shop. And this stuff is being wasted. How do we get it? How do we bring to the public that our tax dollars are going for things like this?
Tax dollars are being wasted in the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's interesting, just to comment one thing on your child. A study was done in the adult prison system and the ratio was 65% of all adult male prisoners in the United States had learning disabilities, and about 35% of them had disabilities severe enough to warrant immediate professional attention. Those are people in the adult system who had come through the juvenile system.
Thanks, ma'am. Best of luck. Okanagan Falls. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I agree with your program, Jack. I was just listening to it. Listen, this thing happened to my daughter 10 years ago. The social workers took her out of the hands of her parents for no apparent reason at all. It was nothing at all. She'd lost it. She got set back cheek to me one day in the street, and I gave her a clout in the ear, and the next thing I knew, the social workers were up and she was taken out. Now, ever since then, she wanted nothing else to do but come back home. And they wouldn't allow her. They took her from one place to the other. She won 7 awards for art, and now she's a nervous wreck. And it's just been the same as she went. She went through drugs. She was allowed out at 12 o'clock at night to the home that she was put to.
Did anyone ever make an attempt to get you and your daughter back together again and explain it?
My daughter always wanted to come home. She always wanted. Today, actually, she thinks the most of her parents. And she's 24 today, but she was only 14 then.
I have a strong suspicion that parents are ignored often, even if parents are at fault. That they're ignored, not encouraged, nor corrected, nor educated in the... Am I right?
You're absolutely right. It's a very condescending system in terms of
when
dealing
I
with
see
parents.
these custody cases where they won't give the grandmother the child, it just...
Oh, yeah. The gentleman's story could go on and on. I don't know the details. All I know is that if the girl has been involved in several systems other than corrections, they don't work together.
Best of luck, sir. Webster and Hugh Hayward, specialized youth counselor, right?
Youth counselor.
After the break. Do you think you can justify your millions wasted? If the system was running properly, could you fire half of human resources?
No, we need social workers. We need people working in a profession. And nobody would lose their job by doing it right. You know, it's just that children and families would benefit, you know, that's all.
The island, go ahead, please.
Yes, Hugh, I've been working in the with juvenile delinquents, well, juveniles, for about 4 years now in wilderness, not camps, but wilderness schools and on the street in school, and now I work in a containment type of facility. And I can't agree with your criticisms more. I have seen all of what you've talked about, and I understand. You know, I agree with you, but I guess maybe it's a little hard to do on a show like this. But I'm wondering about some of the really, if you could get down to the nitty-gritty of what the alternatives are.
That's what I've been trying to do for half an hour.
Okay.
You ask him, you try him.
Okay.
Okay, I owe it to you. Okay.
Well, Hugh, when you talk about working within the community with some of these kids, now I've seen where we've tried to set up certain foster homes and certain kinds of things with kids, and they go out and they continue to do B&Es and vandalism, get drunk, get stoned, fall around, are a danger to themselves and the community. I'm just wondering how you can keep that kid in the community and still provide the resources.
Okay, what I'm talking about is an approach. Okay, and I guess I use personally the wilderness experiences more frequently than any other program because there are more value and more benefit in terms of allowing a child some interaction, some positive interaction. In terms of placing a kid in a foster home by itself, in terms of placing a kid in a wilderness program by itself, anything by itself doesn't work. It has to be a total approach, beginning with who is the kid? Who is he? You know, what are his needs? What are his strengths? What are his weaknesses? Primarily, what are his strengths? Her
He's
strengths.
saying, how do you coordinate this in the community so that he doesn't go out, get drunk, stoned, commit B&Es, and fall around every
You
night?
give him a vested interest in the community, and
How do you
here it
do
is
that?
here. This is the program. This is the secret right here. It's in this little book in 8 pages. I couldn't make it anymore. There's even pictures of me in there. That's how simple a program is.
Okay.
How do you involve the community? Just in the foster home?
Okay, let me tell you what a community is, okay? Okay, at the termination of this program, each time with each group, I came up with a specific goal for each child, and it always involved an employment situation. I went to the most reputable companies in the city 48 times, the different ones. Walked in the door cold turkey, explained the program, told them what process the kid had been through, what we were providing as a support service. I never left an office without a job for a kid. And the money is there. I mean, I'm talking about existing funds.
You're talking about a planned program with
Yes.
a specific goal
And with
for a
supports.
youngster with support.
Yes, in the community. Using existing funds. I don't have to go to the provincial government. I didn't even use provincial funds. I used federal funds that have been there for 25 years. $140 million budget. And that they skimmed it down, and they've got it down to $140 million, $14 million provincially in each province. And
Is it used?
Oh, I use it.
No, but is it used?
No, because children are not prepared. I mean, of what value is there sending a child into an employment situation, into an educational situation, if they can't tie their shoes or can't read?
Mr. Hayward, I'm wondering what you gave some figures on the number of kids that you worked with and the amount of money that you returned to the government, but I was wondering what your success rate was and how you evaluate a success. I mean, what is...
How's success?
Okay, success I evaluate as, you know, the program ongoing is ultimately the success of the program because the backbone of the program is the support system. Okay, most of these kids did not have that support system. However, to my knowledge, out of the 48 kids that were in the program, none of them have been returned to a jail situation. 2 of them have been before the judge. There are something like 23 apprenticeships completed. These are kids that were pushers, that were prostitutes. A lot of the kids are back in school and working. Most of them are contributing to their communities.
Sounds good. Next one. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Hi, Jack. This should all be very familiar to you, shouldn't it? This is Claire Culhane. even the figure 95 out of every 100 that don't need.
I've been through this 1,000 times, Claire. You think of me as a bit of a reactionary. I've always said that 80% of the men in federal jails shouldn't be there.
Right, okay, but here's how
I'm well aware of that.
about it. And first point is to recognize that they don't need to be there in the first place, but let's get to the hard point, the alternatives. The alternatives are the sort of thing, for example, when the Proudfoot inquiry was taking place at Ocala Women's Unit. And we had suggested 75 women there in a place that was never going to work. It was going to get worse.
I did a piece on it myself. All it is a perfectly clean pig pen.
Shut it down and open up 5 halfway houses, or whatever you want to call them.
With proper staff and proper training and proper community support.
You can't have it as long as you've got the system that...
But there are some people that have got to be there.
Or some. But
Some.
you don't need that kind of an institution.
Okay, more importantly, start working with them when they're 15 years old, when they're 8 years old, when they're 6 years old.
Right.
I told you, the object of prison is not rehabilitation.
Nobody
And there's
even-
a lot of difference between the juvenile justice system and the adult justice system. There's a heck of a lot of difference.
No, we're not apart on this one, Claire, I'm afraid. Or rather, I'm
Can
thankful
I just
to
say
say...
one more thing before you
Sure.
shut me off?
Sure.
If we're going to try and find a solution, am I on?
Yes?
If we're going to try and find a solution, we also have to know the methods that are being used against it. Let me give you an example. They're trying to cut down on the amount of visiting. We are now being told that a person can visit 1 prisoner per region, and they're trying to include it on a national policy. So on the one hand, they're talking nonsense about trying to help people rehabilitate and all the rest of it, and they're doing the one sure thing that's going to cut a person off and cut you and me and the likes of us off.
That's
and another
stupid.
thing they're doing, they're going to try and introduce the idea that there's not going to be any more censorship of mail. And yet we all know the RCMP are reading all our mail. And this is
Claire, you always spoil it. The RCMP are not reading all of our mail. They're just looking over the shoulders of customs officers
he doesn't have
for
to
spies
worry
and
about mail
drugs.
being read. Now,
Yeah, but the RCMP aren't reading all our mail.
it doesn't matter. It matters that they are able to read
That's a
some of it.
different issue, my dear, and thanks for your call, Claire. We always manage to finish up a little bit with odds after the break. Hugh Hayward is a specialised counsellor. We've been talking about the failure, which I think is admitted, of our present system. Mind you, society has always failed in dealing with delinquents of all kinds, hasn't it?
Well,
Maybe we should
children
just
are a low
accept it.
priority because they're not politically viable. You know? So
Can't
they
vote,
take
mind you. I'll give the Attorney General's Department credit. A couple of times I've run into children's advocates acting on behalf of children in court, so I've been quite first class.
Not ongoing, though. It's a one-on-one. Every now and then, so much pressure comes to bear that a child's advocated for. But
A lawyer is called, and the lawyer does a good job on it.
sure,
on
there are a
many
lot of
occasions.
excellent lawyers, and but there's no advocate for children in this province. There's no rights for children in this province or in Canada.
Well, now, there you go again, you see. If you drop all common sense, and you suddenly give everybody their own lawyer, proceedings, instead of costing $500 for an appearance, will cost $5,000 for an appearance, and you finally get so tied up in bureaucracy, nothing ever gets done. Surely what's needed is common sense people of goodwill and training to apply humanity to the problems of children.
Well, Justice Berger addressed himself to the courts, I think, very eloquently when he said, the rights of children cannot be guaranteed by legislation. Therefore, it is up to the juvenile court system to deal in that context. What we are dealing with in the juvenile courts is the criminal nature of the appearance, not the needs of the child, not addressing ourselves to the needs and ongoing needs.
That's great, and I'm all for you. But when some little old lady has had her house absolutely, totally torn to shreds by a gang of 5 little monsters, right? And there's a fuss about whether or not the fingerprints should be taken to find out if they did it. One, I'd take the fingerprints, one, so that I knew they did it, and one falsely accused, right? And after that, surely it's up to the judge with some compassion and some advice to deal with the child properly.
Indeed, and I don't believe children should walk away. I believe that children really do have to
Should there be
acknowledge...
punishment for children?
Indeed.
What
but
kind of punishment?
It can be a community work service. I mean, community work service is an excellent form of punishment.
And that's being used.
Yeah, and I also believe in restitution. I think if you boot somebody's house apart, you should darn well fix it up.
But you've got to have enough teeth to make the restitution become effective.
No, You know, we don't have enough. You know, for instance, okay, there's a child in the provincial courts recently in Victoria, who was led to believe, the judge was led to believe that a program would be available for this child. Okay, so the kid sat in containment for a little while, came to the court, and they said no space. So the judge either had to let the kid go, which happens very, very often. Kids walk away with 50, 60 offenses, and they come before the judge. What do you want, son? The judge will say, I don't know. I want to go home. Okay. It's almost that simplistic sometimes, but he comes before the judge. The judge was forced to order this kid into the program, which again adds to the increasing numbers of children inundating these programs. The referrals and agencies are up 50, 60, 70%. Crime's up 70% in the capital region.
I don't believe statistics. I mean, I know
Neither
it's
do
bad.
I think they're general, and I think they're always conservative.
Depends who's doing the statistics. But I mean, is there an answer at all?
Yes, there is an answer, and it's in the community. It's in okay, in order to do a program like mine, for instance, okay, we have a multi-million-dollar containment budget. Okay, for me to get $50,000 out of to do this program, or 25 or 30,000, they have to remove it from that existing budget. Nobody wants to give up 30,000 of their money, so nobody's willing to make the initial investment in alternative programs. We are supporting existing programs that have never worked, never will work, and aren't going to work.
I agree entirely.
So how am I going to get the money? How are these other programs
But
that
it's
are
also
providing alternatives?
bureaucratized, unionized, and managementized that nothing can break through the solid screen of...
In terms of the community, in terms of the unions, in terms of, no, I don't find that to be true. I find unions are very compassionate and very cooperative. You know, when you're subsidizing a child's growth, you're not taking away an adult male's job or a female or an adult person's job. You know, we have to pay these, we have to subsidize these employment opportunities and training opportunities.
Let's go. Go ahead.
Hello, gentlemen.
Yeah.
I would like to say that I agree fully with the sort of
Hayward.
discussion as far as the response of children to the basics. I deal not so much with the hardcore people that Mr. Hayward is
talked about
discussing. I'm a dentist, and I see some children from one of the remedial places, and what I find is that the children, as long as you approach them with the basic concepts, in this case responsibilities that they have towards themselves and with looking after themselves, that in the long run they respond to that. They pick up the challenge and they do what you ask them to do, and they assume that responsibility.
Thank you, dentist. I'm sorry I can't talk to you longer. I want to thank Hugh Hayward for coming over from Vancouver Island.
Pleasure,
contributing
Jack.
Something quite significant to a discussion which normally files me, fools me, and leaves me confused.
We'll make you a believer, Jack.
Oh, I'm a believer. I just want to see it done.
Yeah, it'll be done.
My thanks to Hugh Hayward.
Could I say goodbye to my son, Jeremy?
How old is he?
Jeremy, he's 18 months old. He's probably wondering why his dad's in that tube. I love you, Jeremy.
Hello, Jeremy. Bye. After the break, without Jeremy. Funny, Hugh Hayward was talking about the absolute need for the community and especially volunteers. And just the other day I was bullied by a woman called Harriet Wolfe to allow her and her friends to celebrate and tell you about Volunteer Week in Vancouver, like this. Like this. Are we going to get the ENG or are we not going to get the ENG? Let's just roll the ENG. Harriet Wolfe, star of a little production of the Volunteer Bureau for Volunteer Week in Greater Vancouver. What happened?
Hi, Jack. I'm Harriet Wolfe, and I'm a volunteer. And today we're going to tell you about all the volunteers, all the volunteering types of jobs that are done in our community to meet the demands of today's needs. And here are some of the volunteers to tell you all about it.
Hi, I'm Nancy Elwick, and I'm a volunteer with the Vancouver Volunteer Centre, and I'm also an administrative volunteer with the Vancouver-Richmond Association for the Mentally Retarded.
Hi, I'm Mary Galhida, and I'm a volunteer at Shaughnessy Hospital. I'm a musician, and I try to use music to help the patients feel more involved, both in music and in life.
I'm Helen D. I'm a volunteer at the YWCA, where I teach immigrant women English language. Currently, I'm working in a group that is arranging means to help women in midlife years in Vancouver.
Good day, I'm Len Pocock. I'm volunteer coordinator for Vancouver Region in the Ministry of the Attorney General. I'm also an Anglican priest, and I serve on the board of the Vancouver Volunteer Center.
I'm Phyllis Hawkins. I'm a grandmother, a widow, retired. I can speak German, French, and Italian. I can sing, drive a car, and I find these things very useful in volunteer work, so I do all sorts of things like helping out with CNIB and anything I'm asked to do.
I'm Ethel Smart. I was a teacher. Now I'm a volunteer with the health department. My work is in the schools, checking children's visions. I very much enjoy working with children.
Hi, my name is Don Peeler. I'm a commercial pilot, and I run a games program for retarded children.
Hi, I'm Pat Jones. I'm a shoe repairer in West Point Grey, and I volunteer for the YWCA in adult education. I put together and give workshops.
Hi, I'm Jean Bourne. I'm a volunteer at Sunny Hill Hospital for handicapped children. I take the children out on medical outings and pleasure outings, and I also do the office work for Bliss Symbol Resource Center.
Hi, I'm Mabel Fordyce. I'm a volunteer grandparent. I have two lovely granddaughters and have them with me quite often. Also, one day a week, I'm grandma at the Parents Project, which is about 50 grandchildren, and I love them all, and I am the only older person many of them know, so I hope they learn to trust and seek help from older people.
Hi, I'm Pam Barrett, and I've been doing volunteering for 4 years now, and recently I'm doing physiotherapist at Fairhaven.
Hello, I'm Sam McCullough. I'm a graduate student at Simon Fraser University, and my volunteer work is with the Vancouver Volunteer Center, where I serve on the board of directors and interview people seeking volunteer work.
Hi, my name's Harold Hammer, and I train deaf-blind athletes for the Summer Special Olympics. What I think is the best thing about volunteering is they can't fire me.
Hi, my name's David Weatherspoon. I'm a professional photographer, and I help out volunteering by teaching photography by taking pictures for the Volunteer Center.
Hi, I'm Barbara Constantine. I'm an actress and an executive secretary. I work with the Vancouver Volunteer Center doing public relations, graphic design and whatnot. This is a brochure for Volunteer Week, just letting people know what we're doing and that there's a lot of us out here doing volunteer work, and it feels good.
Hi, Jack. This is just a small sampling of the many people who volunteer their time and energy in our community today. There are over 200,000 people who volunteer to over 350 agencies. So let's give a cheer to our volunteers. Cheer!
A tip of the Webster hat to Harriet Wolfe and all the volunteers. Absolutely first class. Webster and Linda, who are not volunteers, after the break. Volunteer to tell me what's on tomorrow.
Tomorrow we have lawyer Robert McKay about the new ICBC proposal.
And the Woodlands Parents Group.
Yes.
Very good. 9 a.m. precisely.